going for and what is the acreage you're talking about. That's a very basic way to get an idea of what it is. And there's more that gets looked at than just that, but just broad strokes, it's an easy way to start. Another thing that after the appraisal in the state of Wisconsin, if you disagree with the amounts, every landowner has the right to get their own appraisal. And if that's brought back to us within 60 days, we are required to pay for it. Again, this is all just state law. Oh, they also look at property values within the CPCN document itself. And even though it'll be over the top of the existing easements, we are going to be compensating for the entire easement acreage. So number 15, I don't think there was any social or community impact assessments done yet, but again, I believe that's part of the CPCN. What research exists on visual impacts of 765 kV transmission lines, and how were those studies applied to tower design and placement? Not aware of any of those yet. What I do know is that there's been a 765 network since the first part was put into service in 1969 and has been operating since the 70s. It's in Illinois, Indiana, I believe it goes down into West Virginia. So these lines have been around for over 50 years at this point. So I'd imagine there's quite a bit out there, even though it's the first time in this state. Sean, you may be able to help with this one. What studies assess construction and operational noise impacts?
Hi, I'm Sean, project manager for engineering and construction with Grid Alliance. The study's operative word on that is, will be less capable to directly answer that, but I can speak to what our construction practices are and how we manage the noise during that. And really it's, first and foremost, it's established working hours, and if there's any sort of nighttime operations, that would be communicated in advance to the communities. So consistent working hours, and if there are like high noise activities that are taking place, that's communicated in advance, like streaming operations that require a helicopter, things like that. The benefit of a linear project is that you are not in a static location over a long period of time. So that construction activity, moves on from whatever area is impacted relatively quickly. We're talking days, weeks, not months. And then it is elsewhere in the transmission project footprint. That's really it over numbers.
And I just realized I know a couple people in the room, so I really didn't think of introducing myself. I'm Rob, nice to meet you. I'm the land lead for this project. What empirical research on property values near high voltage transmission lines was used in this project evaluation? Not just for my property, but my community, and how will this affect property taxes? So as part of the CPCN, they do look at property values and the impacts from transmission lines. There isn't that much that shows up in the research itself. So that's something that's been looked at for a long time, and it's really hard to find it throughout the research. But again, that's what the appraisals are for, because every property is unique. So that's why every property gets its own appraisal, because they're all treated differently, and it's specifically. How it affects property taxes, I don't believe that it really does in the state of Wisconsin. It's not considered something that would be taxable to my knowledge. I don't know of any impacts to property taxes in Wisconsin. So number 19, for health risk assessments were conducted related to living or working near a 765 kV line, and what peer-reviewed health studies or agency reports were relied upon. I believe in the EMF handouts, or in some of the handouts, is this true, Eric? Correct me if I'm wrong. We cite some studies?
Yep.
Yep, okay.
I believe some of you have that in the handout, but we have ran out of yes,
Okay. But they list some, I think it's a World Health Organization?
National Cancer Institute, World Health Organization, National Institute of Environmental Health Sciences.
Yep, so those are some studies that have looked at it. Again, this is also something that is looked at throughout the CPCN process. What studies address safety risks for children, elderly residents, and vulnerable populations through transmission infrastructure, including those studies concerning those with pacemakers? Again, that's also looked at through the CPCN. It might be dealt with in some of those studies, but it will be in the application itself. Sean, you may be able to help with this. I don't know if this is what it is, but what industry or regulatory safety standards guide construction and operational safety practices?
Yeah, so there's a few components to that. So industry and regulatory and construction really are tied into the same safety practice. Most of these are going to roll up to the NESC, which is the National Electric Safety Code. That defines the parameters that feed into the design and overall appearance and size and spacing and materials that are used for the transmission, engineering and design. So that would be the main, specific localities will have different requirements as well, and meet or exceed any of the local, state, and federal requirements. Okay, section 6, electric magnetic fields. What EMF modeling was conducted for this project, and what studies or measurement standards were used? So the standard that most engineering design companies are going to use is a BPA, a Spotable Power Administration. So what does that mean? It defines the overall structure configuration in this modeling software, and it takes an assessment of different operating conditions and will calculate what the expected electric and magnetic fields that are generated from that structure configuration, and it gets as granular as what type of conductor you're using, the conductor bundling, and the phase spacing of your conductors. BPA is a common tool for multiple parameters within transmission line engineering. What peer-reviewed research supports conclusions regarding EMF exposure risks to humans? So that's one that we already did address on the EMF handout. There are many citations around EMF as a whole, and ELF, or extremely low frequency magnetic fields, etc. I encourage you to take a look at some of those links. There's a wealth of information there. What research addresses EMF exposure impacts on livestock and wildlife? Again, the links that are identified at the bottom of that EMF handout talk about just exposures in general, granularity down to wildlife as well as human exposure. And I will say that the NESC that defines the required clearances for the transmission lines, they're very conservative, so that the values that we're seeing, and on that EMF handout, it shows a conservative calculation of what the exposure magnetic field is. When you compare it to some of your household appliances, it's something to think about in terms of how low it actually is. So again, we've got some additional handouts here. How will EMF levels be monitored after construction, and what monitoring studies or protocols support this plan? So